welcome everybody at our session about space and sustainability. Let me send slides.
Oh, we can go on.
Oh, here. Well, we're here on behalf of Spacefluencers. That's a platform that's with a mission to connect young professionals and space industry leaders and enthusiasts. So our vision is to create awareness about space in all these industries and with all these people. Me and my colleague Gabriela on the other side, we are the hosts of today, and we'll give a short introduction about ourselves. So my name is Chantal Sitaram. I have a background in law. I've done my course in international technology law here in Amsterdam at the Vrije Universiteit. And right now I'm working as a legal counsel in the IT, tech, and privacy law. So that's short about me.
Yes, so my name is Gabriela Bispa. I'm a lecturer at the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. I'm also a consultant in the legal sphere for privacy and tech. And we are both the lead technologies for Spacefluencers. Yes, let me I think one back. Yes, so before we start, me and Chantal, we met our master course, Technology and Law, and we followed this course called Space Law. So during our Space Law course, we as technology lawyers find out like, oh, wait, there's not like a lot of binding rules around the emerging space activities now. So then we got like very aware of the fact that we have to do something about it. That's why we joined Spacefluencers. And we're trying to really bring more awareness to the public, to bridge the gap in space between the public and institutions. And that's how we got into this topic. So now I'll go to explain. Yeah, this one's great. So the main theme, no, I have to go. Yes. The main theme of today is the long term of sustainability of space activities. As the Outer Space Treaty says, the common heritage of mankind, the space identifies as, I'm going to read it. Yes, that space identifies as the common heritage of mankind, and so we're building society really depending on space. So, for example, in communication, so space tech is helping us communicate with each other, but also helping us navigate the day. For example, you being here today and looking for navigation to get here is an example of that. But also climate monitoring. That's also one of the space technologies that are being used, and that's why we need space. So the social and economic benefits are immense from space. And the list goes on. So that's a snapshot. I'm so sorry, I'm a little bit. So then we go to the benefits. Indeed, those are immense, and that's why it's very important to also think about the non-state actors. That's my colleague Chantal will.
So together with the increase of space technologies, there's also a growth in the kind of actors that are involved in this. And we want to specify the non-state actors, as seen written on the slide. Because they also start playing a bigger role in the space industry. Such, you think of the big names: SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic. Those are the most common names in the recent years. So yeah, it's an emerging sector with a lot of actors involved, and also this causes the international community to be aware and acknowledge that there is like a shift of landscape in the whole space industry. So that's what we wanted to point out here as well. And
yes, so that's why we wanted to talk today about space and sustainability, and we invited some amazing speakers. Today we have two panels. So we have one is a physical panel that you see here. This is with Mark Heemskerk, Coco Antonissen, and Jessica Immelman, and Jacob Senior Williams. Then we also have a virtual panel, and that's Bram Winter and Chiara Munter, and they are joining us, and Red Baumgar from online. And we'll start with the physical group, and if the public has questions, you can just ask questions during the session. So feel free to ask the questions if you have one. Yes? Mhm. So now we're going to the physical group first. And I'm going to ask the first questions to our panel. The first question to you all is, what does space sustainability mean to you? So what does space sustainability mean to you? Oh, we have to, oh sorry, do I have to start the presentation? Yes, sorry. We can start with Jacob, with the slides, sorry.
Yeah, we have, all of the speakers will have their own introduction, so that's what we'll start with now first.
So we have to go to the slides.
Slideshow?
Yes. We have to change to the, oh. Yes. So we'll start with Coco Antonisse.
Yes, so thank you. And yeah, we'll start with a short introduction. My name is Coco Antonisse. I work as an advisor on satellite applications for the Netherlands Space Office, which is the Netherlands Space Office is the space agency of the Dutch government, and our task is to implement the Dutch space policy. And that entails a lot of different topics. And I would like to come back to your question later on what sustainability means for me. In general, indeed, people, you already mentioned it, if you think about space, they think about SpaceX, about the International Space Station. Maybe you've heard about the James Webb Space Telescope that was launched last year already, I think. But for me, as an advisor on satellite applications, I mostly work on space applications. So what can you do with this data to benefit Earth? So we implement our space policy at NSO, but we also advise on that to the ministries that are in the end responsible for making the space policy. It was already mentioned there are different types of satellites. So communication satellites that help us communicate, navigation to navigate, of course. Like the most famous one is GPS, but nowadays in Europe we also have the Galileo system, and there's other systems around the world. Today I would like to talk mostly about Earth observation data, and that's very diverse also. There's some heritage. If I think about space and sustainability, I have to think about these instruments. Some of them, 3 of them are launched already. One of them will be launched hopefully 2024 on the PACE mission with NASA. These are all Dutch instruments, and the Netherlands is quite famous for building atmospheric monitoring instruments from space, and that really benefits, I think, climate change research, for example, and insights into air quality, for example. So that's some Dutch heritage. This is an example of a satellite image. Maybe you've seen this before. It's a weather satellite, and it's used to measure or to get insight in large-scale processes like weather forecasts. But you can also zoom in. If you use another satellite, the image I used before, it's a completely different satellite. But if you look at this image, you can see much more details. I'm not sure if you recognize the place already, but this is a European satellite. It's open source data. Everyone can use it. If I go to the next one, this is again another satellite, a bit more details as you see already. And if we continue, we can, yes, we go all the way to this one. Oh, and one more even. This is a 50 centimeter resolution satellite image of the location where we are now. I think this image was taken somewhere in August. And you can see quite some details. Even more zoom in. But it's just an image. So it can be very useful already, but if you want to do large-scale analysis, you need, for example, AI to analyze all the data that is available and to also combine all different data sources. And what I do as an advisor of satellite applications is trying to bridge the gap between space and society. And we do that by talking to a lot of government or organizations on what they need, what kind of use cases there are. Then we provide data, not always us. But also there's other open data sources and commercial data. And there's different programs that we can use to kind of stimulate companies to work on specific solutions. Then what I do on a daily basis is talk with the government, see what they need, make sure there's satellite data available, and then also ask companies and research institutes to come up with proposals to solve these challenges that we have. I wanted to highlight this very quickly. I know it's an international audience. This is mostly interesting for people living in the Netherlands and are looking for data from the Netherlands. But this is a satellite data portal. It's something that we provide from the Dutch government. It's very high optical resolution and radar data. The optical resolution of this satellite data is 50 centimeters, and we provide it for free it only covers the Netherlands, and it's also only available from the Netherlands. But you can use it for free, and it's quite, for as far as I know, we're the only country that does this. But there's lots of other data available also. So there are some commercial data sources that provide these very high resolution optical images, but there's also governmental platforms like the Copernicus program from Europe, but also NASA provides open source data that you can all use if you are interested in, if you need some spatial data. And yeah, then it's just an image, and that's interesting. But what I see very often in solutions is that you need satellite data together with other data, maybe aerial photography, drone data, in-situ sensors, and then you need a smart analysis. Very often this includes AI, of course, and then you get useful information, because that's in the end what governments or companies need. They need useful information, they don't just need an image. So that's what we're trying to do from the Netherlands Space Office, to kind of stimulate companies to come up with solutions for processes and not just provide images. Just a few examples, and I'm sure that the other panelists will dive deeper into some examples of what you can do with satellite data. But for example, you can look at air, you can do air quality monitoring. This is a program that we run for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on food security in developing countries. So they use satellite data to make sure everyone, hopefully to help making sure the food production goes well. There is an example, for example, tree detection or urban vegetation. Many companies are working on this. And also, you can get insights in heat stress using satellite data together with other data often. And these are just a few examples that I quickly want to show. And well, where do I think the future is going to? I'm pretty sure there's going to be more satellites. And I think also one of our online panelists will discuss that, because this creates opportunities, but also risks, because space is slowly getting fuller and fuller. But it's going to provide a lot more data that we can use. Resolution will increase, so we get more data. I hope that in the end it will be easier to integrate different kind of data sources, satellite data together with all this other data. It will be easier, because that's still a challenge nowadays. And I'm afraid we will also have more societal challenges in the future. And we need AI to analyze all the data that is available and get the most out of it. So I think that's where the future is going to. And and I see a lot of AI being used in processing satellite data, and it really offers more opportunity, or we can do much more now than I think 10 years ago. So it's great that it's going that way. So that was just a quick introduction, and I think I spoke too long, sorry.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coco. So now we're going to Jacob.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Jacob Senior Williams. I work for Science and Technology. They're a company from Delft. I'm the lead Earth observation data scientist, which means my friends and family have no idea what I do. But we're one of the companies that work with the NSO to realise the needs of the government and put those satellite data to work and actually produce useful products. So space is the current frontier. Technically, low Earth orbit is the current frontier, but it's a lot less sexy than saying space is the current frontier. And companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Orbit are annihilating the economic barriers to entry that once existed for space. So the space shuttle average cost per kilogram was about $55,000. The average from 1970 to 2000 was about $18,000. Average for a SpaceX Falcon 9 flight is about $2,500, so nearly an order of magnitude lower. This is driving accessibility, so it's much more economically feasible to get to space, but also these space launches are now weak-linked pretty much. SpaceX themselves have launched 4 times more satellites than the rest of the world combined. A lot of those are Starlink, and I have my own opinions on that. But that means it's a lot more feasible to get products up to space. And that means that more people will be interested in doing it, and that's going to drive capability. So that means that we, as end users and data scientists, will have access to a whole host of more data sources ready to be used. Today's capability, been touched on before, the Copernicus program is probably the largest. This is by the European Space Agency, and it's an open source data platform. There are currently 5 satellites in orbit, planned for another 6 missions, 5 constellations rather, and it's generating 12 terabytes of data every single day, which is insane. And that kind of scale is required the AI pipelines to be able to process and actually use all of that data. So here are 2 images from Sentinel. On the left-hand side, we have the UK, France, and Belgium and the Netherlands, looking quite dry in summer this year. That's been taken from Sentinel-3. Depressing, because really that part of Europe should never be that brown, and it's probably going to look that brown again in the future. And then on the other side, we have north of Italy. So this is taken from Sentinel-1 data, and this is looking at the soil moisture analysis. So on the top, we see June 2020, nice and blue, plenty of water in the soil there. June 2022 at the bottom, a lot of red, not much soil, that's bad times. And that's also probably going to happen again in the future, but satellite data is giving us that level of insight on a 4 to 5 day basis. We can get updates of this type of data. Satellite data is also way beyond red, green and blue. We have synthetic aperture radar, or SAR data, which can it has its own complications, but it has its own massive benefits. You have very high resolution RGB images, down to about 15 centimeter resolution from something orbiting hundreds of kilometers around the Earth, which is pretty crazy. You've also got multispectral, so instead of red, green, blue, you have 13 different bands, and then hyperspectral. Hyperscout 2, which is a Dutch satellite, has 48 bands. Prisma, which is an Italian satellite, has 239 different spectral bands. So that's like 72 RGB images in one image in the data equality. So the amount of information you can get out of that is so much more expansive, effectively. But actually looking at how we can use this for sustainability applications, so something that was mentioned in the recent Frozen Planet documentary by the BBC is they're tasking satellites to monitor glacial retreat. At S&T, we're using it to monitor air pollution for different levels of particulate matter, different chemicals. You can use it to track illegal logging and deforestation, and you can look at a whole host of different things. It's really anything you can think of, and you can put a satellite to task, you can go and monitor and develop a product to monitor it. Something specifically we're looking at, or I'm working on, this is a project with the European Organisation for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites. Thank God they shorten it to just EUMETSAT. And the Japanese Meteorological Agency looking at geostationary weather satellites, how we can classify them from data going all the way back to the 1970s. So we're talking, these satellites take images every 30 minutes, and the recent ones are every 10 minutes, so we're talking petabytes of data over decades. And we're looking at classifying them depending on the image, just using transfer learning with pre-trained models. But then actually we're going to develop this into intensity prediction and trajectory as well, so we'll be able to more accurately say how intense they're going to get, where they're going to hit land much earlier. And I think this was brought into focus, not nicely, but it was brought into focus by Hurricane Ian that hit Florida not too long ago. Looking more at the Netherlands, so this was a project where we monitor construction sites. So previously the inspectors would just drive around periodically, and that was a waste of their time really, because the construction might not have started yet, or the actual workforce there would predict when they're going to come in, so they make sure everything's meeting health and safety when they arrive. Whereas now what we're able to do is monitor a construction site on a weekly basis and give updates to the inspectors and say, this is where you need to go, this is what's changed. You can see the heat map, so that's 4 images over the course of about a year on a project just north of Rotterdam. And you can see how the changes actually shift from the top left down to the bottom right as the project goes through its cycle. And Meander as well, I started to mess it up slightly, but this is monitoring changes of the waterways of the Netherlands. There are a lot of waterways in the Netherlands. And what we're able to do is monitor if vegetation's increased, if it's an invasive species, if it needs to be taken care of, because that's going to affect the water flow throughout the whole system. So it's to ensure that the waterways are clear as they should be. You can also look for man-made changes, so if someone's built a jetty next to their house, you can check that against the permit record to make sure that they're allowed to build that. And again, the workers would just sort of drive around and note down, that's changed here, this has changed there. Not very efficient, using a lot of fuel as well. Whereas now they can be targeted and we can say, vegetation's increased right here last week, go and have a look, and it just makes it much more efficient for their time. And the last one, we're using a whole range of data like air quality data, climate data and water quality to actually be able to predict and determine the flow of diseases and viruses like COVID-19 within urban cities. So using satellite data, we can analyse the water pollution and other environmental factors to actually monitor and trace that in a much more accurate method.
So,
That's me.
just in between, are there any questions from the audience? You? Oh. Oh.
There's the line. It's not on. Hello, Mr. Hello?
Climate pollution, water pollution, etc. Do you also look at care? Because obviously, to be able to execute these kind of AI models, you need a lot of computing power. That also needs a lot of water. So in the end, it doesn't really help sustainability for me. I don't know. It sounded a bit.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Well, another big problem with satellites is the only way to get up there is to burn a whole lot of kerosene. There's no way around Newton's third law, unfortunately. But it's something that should always be considered when you're building these systems. Fortunately, the scale is more dependent on the traffic that's coming through and using the models. To actually build them, the compute isn't maybe necessarily as high as it could be, or could be for larger projects. So if you make them quite specific to a user base, then you can limit the amount of compute power that's going to be used to actually produce them and keep them in service.
Okay. Other questions? So thank you for your question.
First of all, my compliments that there's a completely young, very diverse 4 women in the panel, as in this entire conference. It's 6:30. I'm not ready for drink. I want to hear more. I'm very glad you mentioned Sentinel and also the satellite, because my image was that Copernicus is semi-private. If I watch Euronews, I get a 5-minute infomercial what they do. But I wish that 99% of my friends which don't know that apparently as a university, startup, scale-up, company, government, you can access this data. So my question to you is, there's about 40 people in the room and maybe some people watching online. How do we make sure 70 million Dutch people know this and 500 million European consumers? Because then we've got a lot more brains working on solving climate, ethical, slavery solutions I heard earlier, using this data. And whoever has the best answer can answer the question.
Look at me. Well, no, I think this is a very good question. It's a huge challenge. Yeah, we haven't really solved it yet. Like I always say, so I need to advise our government on what they can do with satellite. Ideally, I'm not like my job is not necessary anymore in a few years, but I'm afraid that's not going to happen because every time I find new people that are not aware that there are satellites, Earth observation satellites, that they exist. Indeed, also not aware that a lot of data is available for free. So to be honest, I don't have the solution. Maybe someone else has it. Yeah, I think we can do much better on outreach, and yeah, that's I need to think about it.
Maybe I offer a bottle of craft beer or wine of your choosing. If you project this, like Leilani Munther did with her touchline projector at the UN headquarters on our Dutch parliament.
Sure, I didn't.
Like a way to get more media attention and get a wider audience and educate our politicians, all 150 of them at the same time. Leilani Munther did this with a modified Tesla with a projector on it at the United Nations. She projected movies about biodiversity loss, ocean pollution, etc. That presentation of the gentleman on the right and your presentation earlier, I was in Italy. I'm trying to convince my friends, but I saw this in person. I see this every 3 months in NSA in one infographic. I want this live on NOS websites, etc. That I get these visuals daily, that people can see what you're seeing on a daily basis. So whoever managed to project it first on the Dutch Parliament gets a bottle of craft beer or wine of your choosing.
Challenge.
I'll arrange the electric car.
Thank you. We'll go on to the next slide for this guy, Lama.
Thank you. And interesting questions. Maybe I can address some of them as well in our presentation. But my name is Jessica Immelman. I'm business lead at Space for Good. A little bit about our company. We leverage remote sensing data analytics, so anything from open source commercial satellites through to drone technologies, geoinformation and artificial intelligence. We gear this all towards social and environmental impact projects world. Oh, my microphone's a bit odd, I feel. So a bit about our journey. We were established back in 2017 in the European Space Agency Business Incubation Center. And from there, we were really a group of enthusiastic individuals getting together on the weekends, evenings, doing hackathons, kind of infiltrating our expertise in remote sensing for impact challenges. And it wasn't until about 2020 that we met our long-standing partner now, Dr. Willy Smits, who's a leading agroforester and forest restoration expert. And with him, we decided to co-develop our integrated agroforestry and restoration management and monitoring platform. Now, because of this, we could establish our company. We got 11 full-timers. We're proud to say we're now 12 of us, with a broader contributing community of freelancers, interns, and growing board. And we could establish our offices in the Hague Humanity Hub, which is a peace and justice hub. And then last year, we were officially certified as a social enterprise, meaning that our bottom line is impact. But as a benefit corporation, we're the first geospatial entity to be certified like this in Europe. And we've been primarily project-based till now, but because of our ambition to scale impact, we said, okay, now's the time to also put effort into developing services and products. So essentially what we're offering is remote sensing geospatial data analytics. We are of course developing artificial intelligence machine learning models to process this data, offering predictive insights. We monitor and report around this, and some of it could be the development of a platform to relay this information or API integration, but we never want to over-engineer it. Sometimes it could be as easy as a report or a WhatsApp alert. And of course, capacity development, not only within our projects, but to the broader public on remote sensing and GIS, so that more of us can understand how to access the data, but also utilize the technology. So we're active in 4 sectors. Agriculture, forestry, conservation, biodiversity is where we mainly see our project requests today. And as a result, we've decided to focus on nature-based solutions, monitoring, reporting, and verification for our services and products. But with how diverse the applications for remote sensing is, we don't really want to funnel ourselves there completely. So we do have peace and justice activities. For example, we worked with Halo Trust and Carter Center to detect unexploded ordinances in the Middle East. But then also in climate and infrastructure, 2 examples there. One was with World Bank, where we were assessing climate risk to mitigate armed conflict in Africa. And then with AMREF, detecting latrines. So basically they wanted to see where their sanitation investments were going and how it was actually manifesting in a spatial sense. So we're active worldwide. I could probably put many other dots up there, but you kind of want to see the planet. And we are focusing on many areas. I think our colleagues here today have highlighted a lot of other use cases. But I'll dive in right now to Reforester. Now this is this integrated agroforestry and reforestation management and monitoring platform. With this, we're developing a suite of insights that can facilitate the activities on the ground of a 250,000 hectare reserve in Borneo, Indonesia. Now with Dr. Willy Smits, we said to him, okay, what's the most important considerations that we would like to integrate? into this platform, and it ranged from illegal logging detection and prediction through to biomass, fire risk mapping. We also have a route optimization component, but basically a one-stop shop for him to say, okay, what's going on without having to send people into the field, which is very time-consuming, expensive, and in many cases dangerous. So one component is the deforestation detection and prediction, thanks to machine learning. And here we're offering alert systems to deforestation events in field. We'll then send a WhatsApp message or alert via the platform and say, hey, in-field operative, you need to get to this location. We even help them get from A to B as fast as possible. We think deforestation is happening. Then, very kindly, they return us a photo, which helps to train our models and validate the instance. So we're seeing high accuracy, and as a result, over the last 3 years, we've been able to reduce illegal logging quite substantially in the area. Similarly, for fire detections, very often you'll see fires where illegal logging is happening or encroachment is beginning, but there's also a big concern with climate change and increased droughts that these fires are going to actually start destroying the systems that we're looking after. But we don't only observe what's there, we also are helping initiatives in the afforestation or reforestation sectors. So, for example, we're working with Ecosia. Many of you may know search engine, with every click they plant a tree, super cool. But they have a responsibility to make sure that's actually happening, so we help audit. On the other side of the spectrum, we work with Oneter, one of their partners, who are part of the afforestation project, so we help them with suitability mapping, but then also monitoring the project to facilitate management. And then finally, what I find really interesting is unlocking business cases and use cases for these very, very important systems. We're working right now with Rabobank on their Acorn marketplace, where we're assessing above-ground biomass or carbon sequestered by complex agroforestry systems. Now, agroforestry is a combination of trees, shrubs, and ground covers. It's quite a complex system. And with the help of artificial intelligence in combination with open source satellite data, LiDAR drone data, and in-situ field measurements, we can get an assessment of how much carbon is there. That money then makes its way back down to the smallholder farmers, who can then use this to manage and transition over to these systems. We have a project also in the Netherlands that we're doing, also focusing very similarly on the same thing. To close, we're very proud to be part of the XPRIZE Rainforest semi-finals. Here, it's not exclusively relying on satellite data. We're using a lot of drone imagery. But here we are aiming to assess over 400 species completely autonomously within a 72-hour period. So that's the collection of the data, the processing, the analytics, and reporting on how many species we can observe utilizing automated systems. So please stay tuned for that. Our team is, of course, the masterminds behind us all. We're very lucky, young team, diverse team, usually dual experts. So we've seen people with technological experience, but also sectoral experience in agriculture and forestry, for example. And then lastly, we work with a myriad of partners, from research institutes, governmental entities, municipalities, you name it. And with them, they really implement this and make this possible. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Are there questions from the public for Space for Good?
Yes.
Oh.
Borneo, Indonesia, yes. Yes, okay, thank you very much.
I am half Indonesian, so actually,
No, I
little
appreciate
correction,
that.
sorry.
No, I appreciate that.
Borneo was the colony of Holland, so now it's called Kalimantan, like Celebes, it's Sulawesi.
Yes, indeed. We're actually hitting
I'm sorry for the correction.
No, I appreciate it very much. I think it's...
Yeah, but the orang-utans lives so in the forest.
Yeah, we're actually heading there next
Actually,
month.
influence of it.
Indeed. We're heading there next month, and we're seeing all of these terminology changes as we're making the bookings. We do all these searches, and it's like, what? So I appreciate that. Keep that in mind.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. Then we go to Mark Heemskerk, so he's the last one of the physical panel. Tickets will go automatically. The next slides. Right, exit. Not going? Oh.
Thanks for having me.
Your slide. Is everything the slides? Oh, maybe you have some help? You know the slide? Your slide? Almost there.
Microphone?
Something coming through.
The older mic is not. It's working?
The mic, can we get the second mic? No? The mic, yeah. I hope you can.
Bit easier anyway, so I hope everybody in the room can hear me. Also, people online. Sure, you can see them.
Thanks so much. Works much better. Yes. So I'm here from my own company, which is called IC Space, which is a very young startup. Officially, we were founded only January this year, but we've been working on these projects for several years already. And IC Space is a space company, so we are using an acronym that's, I think, almost obligated in space. ICE stands for Isolated Confined Extreme Environments. So what we're doing is basically a testbed and a technology development company for technologies that will allow us to live and survive in space a little bit more safer and a little bit more efficiently. So just a very brief recap about myself. I have almost no clue what I'm doing with AI. I'm a geologist by training, which means that I like to talk to rocks, and I like to lick rocks, I like to get stuck in rocks, as you can see over there as well. I did my master's here in Amsterdam at the Vrije Universiteit. And then I founded this own company, which was mainly focused on how to survive inside a lava tube. We basically started with a project to help us go to the moon, survive there for longer periods of time. So not just go there and be there for several days, like the Apollo missions, but actually staying there for longer consecutive periods. And this will happen. We will return to the moon. And later on, even beyond. So the space business is booming, as I think most of us here already know. There's a lot of new technologies being founded, a lot of new startups, a lot of scale-ups, SpaceX, Blue Origin. Some of the big names are already mentioned here. But it's actually a huge space economy worldwide. In 2021, we've crossed the 500 billion mark, which is almost roughly to the GDP of the Netherlands. So in terms of international economy, space is literally booming. And that's also why I founded this company, to do these kinds of projects and to test these kinds of technologies. We are quite an inclusive mission. We only did our first campaigns in Iceland, but we also have a campaign coming up in Spain and next year also in Czech Republic. And these kinds of missions that I'm talking about are analog space missions. So we are simulating on Earth what it would be like to live in space. For this we use a lot of technologies. And of course, I'm also not doing this alone. We have a quite big team. We currently have actually 28 members from 16 different countries. As I said, quite worldwide and also quite young. So the average age is actually 27 with all these volunteers for the company. So our main missions are actually inside subsurface terrains. So we're going into caves, we're going into lava tubes, such as this one in Iceland, which is called Stefánshellir. And that is to prepare ourselves for survival on the lunar surface or maybe underneath the lunar surface. And for that, of course, we are dependent on technologies such as AI. I'm not sure if I can get the video to play. We have something. No, unfortunately, we do not have a video to play. So I can at least show you the still. So this is actually a LiDAR scan from the cave. This is also one of the technologies that we are trying to implement in future lunar missions, because of course we need to know what a cave will look like before we actually send humans into this cave. We have to know what's happening, we have to know whether it's actually a safe environment or not. And for this we use a lot of technologies which are currently also still in development, but which are also heavily dependent on AI. So even though I don't work with a lot of AI or data science myself, parts of our collaborators are actually working with us. And one of the things is actually in the middle picture here as well, which is called Spotnet, from one of our collaborators from Scotland, David Smith, which is dependent on the YOLO system, you only look once, which is sort of an instant recognizing system inside the helmets of astronauts to actually recognize where they are inside the lava tube, but also where the other astronauts and other points of interest are. So we can actually use that also to sort of locate where they have to go. And eventually we also try to implement this within artificial or sort of augmented reality helmet, which you can also see on the right, the HoloLens from Microsoft, which is also already used in space at some point. Together with Texas A&M and the International Space University, we set up a system to sort of communicate with the astronauts while they are on mission or on EVA, extravehicular activity, during these space analog missions. So that we can also, from the Mission Control Center, pinpoint where they have to go and make complete 3D models of the cave and its surroundings just by basically looking around. And with that, we of course have a lot of key partnerships. So as I said, we are a very young company, not just in terms of we only just been founded, but also in terms of our members and partnerships. So we're working a lot with universities, just because then you have a younger audience and you can also have a lot more interaction. But they are still like looking into the big open skies and they're like, why don't we try something completely radically new? Sometimes it fails harshly and sometimes it succeeds. And actually those are the coolest points, of course. And that also means that we can get to publish a lot. I'm really a researcher myself, which is very cool to see how we can actually not just present at these kinds of conferences, but also at scientific conferences and sort of tap into the whole world and be even more inclusive to get these kinds of knowledge from all over the place. Of course, we also have a lot of partners. Obligatory slide, and then I would like to say from Into the Universe, and thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark. So let's start our panel discussion. So I heard you talk about sustainability a lot and about data being used for sustainability. Can you explain to the public and to us how does data and specification contribute to the sustainability goals of the United Nations, for example? You can,
absolutely.
sure.
So the data coming from satellites, the great thing about satellites is they just go around the Earth, and they keep going around the Earth until they fall out of the sky. And so you can actually monitor whatever you want, wherever it is, at whatever time. So if you want to look at a sustainability goal, for example, if you want to look at the ice caps and the extent of the ice and how it's retreating, there are satellites out there that are monitoring that. If you want to look at deforestation, Sentinel-2 goes maps the entire Earth every 4 days. So you get, every 4 days you'll get a new image of the Earth. A lot of the time there'll be clouds in the way, especially in the Netherlands, which is a bit of a pain. But the fact that you have such a large amount of data and in such a wide variety of formats means that you can really attack any of these sustainability goals that you really want to target and challenge.
So if I understand you, that means that you can tackle all of them because of the space applications. Yes. And what are your takes on?
Well, I think roughly the same. I don't know exactly by heart which SDG is which one, but almost all of them you can do remote sensing data is of added value. Indeed, also you mentioned already a lot of things, biodiversity, and usually it's like you don't measure biodiversity but you measure indicators that say something about biodiversity. And with all these different kinds of satellites, you can look into very large scale processes. So, for example, very large scale, you can look into deforestation. But you can also, if you zoom in with those other kind of satellites, you can actually look at like plant health, and you can see like individual trees or other kind of like plants, and you can actually see how healthy they are, for example, because you don't only look, you don't only see what you can see with your own eyes, but you can also, with hyperspectral imaging that you were already mentioning, you can see more than you can see with your own eyes. And I think for a lot of different things, it's of added value.
Okay, thank you. Another question, Mark, for you.
Yeah,
What
well-
maybe you first have an answer.
Something that I would also like to add, which is maybe not directly satellite data, but it is also space technologies, of course. When, for example, when we're going to the moon, we are in need of new technologies. And of course, we're not just developing that to survive on the moon, but they also have huge implications and applications here on Earth. For example, if we find out how to properly 3D print houses on the lunar surface, it will also make it easier to 3D print houses here on Earth. And with some of the climate change already happening in what we currently call sub-Saharan desertification will also increase largely, and will probably offset some 120 to 200 million people, for which we will eventually have to find either new houses or at least find some place of shelter inside a very dry desert. And in that sense, actually, Martian technologies of 3D printing houses inside the Martian desert will also be able to be applicable here on Earth in Earth deserts. And it's just one of the many, many applications also in terms of water treatment, in terms of water recyclability, in terms of extreme botanics. A lot there is to learn from deep space missions like lunar and Martian missions will also be applicable here on Earth. So.
That's interesting. And I also heard you talk about Starlink for a bit. And you were like, not really giving your opinion, but can you maybe explain to the public how Starlink can have an effect on the sustainability of space, for example?
Yes, so the number of satellites that they want to launch for the entire constellation is tens of thousands, and there's already a lot of satellites up there, and these satellites have a very short lifetime, and they're just going to keep launching them up and replacing them. And with all of those extra things orbiting, there's just increase of the chances of colliding and then causing an absolute catastrophic chain reaction throughout the entire low Earth orbit sphere is quite significant. Yeah, I can see the pros, like internet for people in very remote places. Sure, that's a good thing. Being able to turn it on in, for example, when there's a civil war in Ethiopia and they turn off the internet and then you can provide it. It definitely has its pros, but it definitely has a lot of cons as well.
Yes, and I just got talked about peace and justice also with remote sense, I don't remember. It's also, can you explain how that works with applications of...
Well, if I go back to the World Bank example, we're analyzing climate change in specific areas and then the risks associated with that change. And that was really geared towards translating this into World Bank understanding of where resources need to be distributed. So, for example, what they want to try and limit is that one village has food or water and another village is because of climate change affected by that, and there could be a conflict that could emerge. That way, World Bank can come in good time with the proper resources, education mechanisms, and most importantly, financing to get resilience building in place in these regions. So.
Interesting. And then last question about what are challenges of combining space applications with AI, and how does that contribute to sustainability on Earth or space?
I think it's for any kind of anything you do with AI, you need training data and validation data. And I see very often with, and you guys know more about this, and you're probably in a different field also, that for basically every project that I see, the biggest challenge is getting enough test data, training data, and validation data. I think that's like the biggest challenge actually. That there's always too little data to properly train.
And do you share like a data scientist in
Yeah.
share the same vision, or?
No, slightly different. I think so for example, Sentinel-2 multispectral satellite has 13 spectral bands, and if you look at the pre-trained models and use transfer learning, you can't use 13 bands, you can use 3 bands. And so you're really limiting the amount of data you can put into the model, and you're potentially losing key information by limiting it just to the red, green, blue bands. So it increases the development time because you have to go through the data and develop those models yourself. And also for things like SAR, the radar data, you look at an image from that and it's basically just noise at first glance. There's a lot of complicated pre-processing steps to clean it up and make it usable and get information out of it. And the same thing happens with hyperspectral data with 239 bands. If you just lose 236, you're losing so much valuable information from all that. So the actual development time is a bit more involved as well, and you've got a lot of changing conditions, changing lighting conditions based on where the sun is, so you get water gliding on oceans. There are quite a few technical challenges. It's fantastic.
Okay, thank you. So because we're running out of time, so we have to go to the virtual panel. So are Bram, Chiara Munter, and Ed Bong are ready to talk about. I'm going to stand because then you can see me and then you can also hear me better. Is it okay? Can you see me? Yes, you can see me.
We hear you loud and clear. We hear you very well.
Oh, perfect. So now I think we can start with Chiara because she's going to talk about SDG 18, a very interesting topic and also very valuable topic for this conversation. Chiara, I will give you the word.
Thank you so much. Let me just get my can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Okay, that is very great. Yeah, it's been really nice to already hear from the other panelists. I'm very happy when the SDGs and when sustainability comes up because this is my big passion project. Very sad that I cannot be with you there in person, but currently in Paris and it was a bit last minute to come over, but sending you all my love. My name is Chiara Munter. I'm one of the co-founders of SDG 18 Space for All, and I will explain what this is shortly. But I would briefly like to introduce myself and my kind of whirlwind journey through the space sector. So that's me. I'm a bit of a, say, kind of world citizen. I grew up in New Zealand, I lived in Germany and the Netherlands, and now I live in France. And I've always been very passionate about space and sustainability. And never really quite sure how to combine both of them until May 2020 when kind of inspiration struck. So I did my bachelor's in the Netherlands studying project management for sustainable development and followed this with a master's degree in sustainability science. And then in May 2020, I got together with a few fellow students and we co-founded an initiative to get space on the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. And I will tell you more about this in a bit. I then continued to also do an internship at the Office of Astronomy for Development to draw concrete connections of how astronomy projects contribute to each of the existing SDGs and their specific targets and indicators. Following that, I am also a member of Spacefluencers, like our wonderful moderators today. And I was, for the past 2 years, was working as a space journalist, editor, and event coordinator at Spacewatch Global, so really getting an in-depth view of the space sector. Now I am working at ESA on policy strategy and communications, and right now I am talking to you all at the World Summit AI. So we just covered a bit of the topic of the SDGs. I think most of you are very familiar with these. So they were created to produce a set of universal goals that meet urgent environmental, political, and economic challenges facing our world. And in total, there are 17 SDGs. And during my studies, I focused quite heavily on this and a lot of projects that connect to these goals. And at some point, I stumbled across a big article by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, which details how space technology and space data contributes heavily to all of these goals. And it was just mentioned by, I think, Jacob and Coco. But it became a bit puzzling to me why space hasn't found its mention anywhere on this agenda. That seemed a bit strange. And then we continued talking and we thought more about space, not only looking from space to Earth and how space can help us here, but also what are we doing in space and how do we need to protect that environment that is so important to us. And that is how SDG 18 was born. Now I do need to say this is an initiative, this is not officially connected to the SDG agenda yet, but we are in communications with the UN and the goal is to get space on the next global agenda come 2030. But since I don't know what that agenda is going to be called yet, we're sticking with SDG 18 for now. So our idea with this initiative, our vision is to ensure the sustainable use of outer space so that all of humanity can equally benefit. So the space for all aspect, for all generations, for all people. And our mission is to create more awareness for the regulations of outer space. I know this is something that Briella brought up before, that there are not many legally binding agreements, and that there is a need for a global legal framework to establish a prominent position on the global agenda. And the way we want to do this is to advocate for an extra SDG or for a place for space on the global agenda, to advocate for more binding legal agreements, and to create awareness amongst and connect different sectors, because this is incredibly important. Now, I'm sure many of you are already aware, a lack of awareness and knowledge are big factors that hinder development. So you really need to build up these aspects. And you need to make people aware of certain issues and also what tools there are in order to change this. And it is very important to bring up these topics that our orbit is not infinite and that subjects like space debris pose a giant threat to the space environment. And that we are putting a lot of amazing technological advancements into space. We need to protect that sphere as well. So it is important for policies and sectors that support socioeconomic development, that support public safety and health, showing that we cannot reach the first 17 goals without harnessing space properly. So here on the slide, I just listed a few pointers where SDG 18 can help, because it does help to create more awareness and knowledge of space generally, amongst other sectors, so getting outside of our space bubble. It helps to educate, and then also it increases the awareness about the tools that are out there and that can be used, the tools and the data, like many of the panelists have already introduced. So it increases capacity building, which also increases public support, and that in turn also leads to more support for space sustainability. I mean by space sustainability, I hope I'm not rushing through this too quickly, but there are 4 key elements of sustainability in space that we've identified. The first one being the political aspect. So again, bringing up the point that there are very little legally binding agreements, and we have 5 international treaties and 5 principles in place for the activity of outer space, and they deal with issues such as arms control, liability for damage, exploitation of natural resources, and so forth. But the last one of these treaties went into force in 1984, and the last principle was added in 1996. And this is just too long ago, considering the speed of technological advancements and the increased access to and interest in space. So the laws and the treaties that are there give a very good basis, but now we need to build on them quickly, especially when looking at also the military uses of space and the rising urge of sovereignty of states. So it's very hard to reach a consensus on international law because all the states and all the countries are trying to come up with their own space legislation. And also when it comes to an increase of players and an increase of satellites in orbit, we have discussions such as space traffic management would also need to be considered. A second aspect or element of sustainability in space is the economic aspect. So when we're talking about asteroid mining or planetary mining, but also space tourism, these are all sectors that are going to be increasingly growing and that need to be governed in a somewhat sustainable manner. Now, when we're talking about the environmental aspect, I think a key element is space debris, which is artificial material that is orbiting Earth that is no longer functional. And currently we have over 130 million objects orbiting our Earth, most of which are defined as space debris, and they of course pose a huge danger to any future exploration missions, to the International Space Station, to satellites. And the problem is that a lot of these items are just too small to be registered. And with their incredibly high velocity, they can really damage any surface they come across and break off into even more pieces, which is then called the Kessler syndrome. And finally, and I think a very important aspect of space sustainability is also the social aspect when we talk about equity. So of course, even though space is technically open access, very few parties do actually have the financial and technical capabilities for this access and to grow this access further. So this also leads to considerations of who holds the power. And there are very few players who hold a higher level of power of interaction on the global scale when it comes to decision-making and resource use. So the barriers to enter for space are becoming lower, but they are still there. And this is something that needs to be considered. And due to a growing number of actors, we really need certain measures to be put in place, and we need a focus and a prioritization on pressing issues. We've heard a lot of me talking, you're probably wondering, why should we focus on space? We're facing so many challenges here on Earth. I mean, anytime you look at the news. But this is where space helps us, and it has been covered by some of the other panelists. I'd just like to give a few examples of the many ways that space can help us. So when we're looking at, for example, looking at climate change, Satellite data gives us more information about the effects of climate change than we can ever measure from Earth. So we could not calculate the thickness of the ice layers on the poles without satellite images. And this is also brought up when it comes to the SDG facing poverty, for example. Satellites can help to forecast natural disasters, coordinate help, and optimize the best use of natural resources, and also map populated areas and their access to basic services, so they can prevent people from falling below the poverty line and help target specific support to those in need. Now, when we consider natural disasters such as forest fires, remote sensing technology is very valuable and very useful because it's not uncommon for an Earth-observing satellite to be the first to detect a wildfire. And also, when we're just considering medical breakthroughs, and not to mention a global pandemic, there's huge potential to use Earth observation data to shed new light on the societal and economic challenges that are currently taking place due to the pandemic. And also generally, space exploration has helped to improve medical equipment quite a bit. One example for this is the digital imaging breast biopsy system, which was developed through Hubble Space Telescope technology, but also the capability of growing cells in microgravity, which helps to push medical advancements quite far. I've come to an end. This is a lot of input, I'm aware, and I'm happy to talk about the progress of SDG 18 further in our discussion, because we are by no means done. This is just a start, and we're doing further research and also taking further steps and looking at what governance models are there, how can it compare to, for example, global commons like Antarctica or the deep seabed, and we hope to reach the next global agenda. So please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions, comments, ideas, or insights you might have, and I am very much always happy to talk about space and sustainability, either in person or over a virtual coffee, so let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think yeah, so we'll continue with the next one. Do you have time?
You have to keep it a bit short because we're really running out of time, so we can do you have presentation ready? But I will make it shorter because we really have to go to the discussion.
All right.
So I don't know.
I'm picking Bram.
He was elected anyway.
All right, I think everyone can see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I will keep it short. I have only a couple of minutes of presentation. First, just before I start talking about space and sustainability, and especially I want to focus in this presentation towards the young professionals, students that maybe are in the room. But first, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Brandon Winter. I'm a PhD student, or as they call it now in the UK, a DPhil student in University of Oxford. I'm a geochemist, planetary science by background. So actually, a fun fact, Mark and I did study together. We started in the same year, so I'm also a geologist by background. And my PhD is about understanding how Earth magma ocean work, how lunar magma oceans work. So it's a bit of like planetary science slash a lot of chemistry. I did also study in PU Amsterdam. I graduated actually this year. And in Amsterdam, I did coordinate a lot of space projects for PU students and a couple of other events and activities. So the thing I actually wanted to talk about, because it might be interesting for all the young professionals, is really this topic about, okay, you can think about space, you can talk about space, but how do you actually make an impact as a young person in the space sector? I think we already seen a couple of examples, and many of you know who are connected to Space Lancers. Of course, this is also one of these organizations. But today I wanted to share a little information about the largest young professional organization for the space sector, which is the Space Generation Advisory Council. So it's an organization for people between 18 and 35, across with every background that you can imagine, with every nationality that you imagine. We're currently over 21,000 members worldwide. People who are all interested into space and different kind of topics related to space. Next to that, we are a community that really connects people with interests together. We also have an advice role. So work that we do within the organization during events, during project groups and other things that might show up soon. We all reported towards the UN Copious, other UN events, and in the end also towards other players in the space sector, national agencies, companies, whoever is partnering with Space Generation Advisory Council. In this organization, there's 5 big pillars of things that we do. First, we host multiple events every year, mainly related to the big space conferences, big space events that are happening. For instance, ISC, we have our own event, but also Fusion Forum in Colorado, there's an event, and we have local events also happening. Then next to it is also project groups. We have at this moment 11 project groups also related to different kind of topics, which I will show soon. Might be also of interest for anyone who has like an AI background. We do a lot of personal development. We host around 75 to 100 scholarships, so we send people all across the world to attend these events. And then next to it, which I already said, we do these UN-related activities. So talking more about the space groups, space project groups, this is really where technical but also policy work of Space Generation Advisory Council is taking place. These include, maybe I think the most relevant one for this summit is the Space and Cybersecurity Group, which is a group that on an annual basis works towards solving certain kind of problems relating to space or cybersecurity. If you want to know more about this project, please go to the website spacegeneration.org towards the project groups, and you find for every project group you find more information and who to contact you as well. So a bit about me, what I do in Space Generation Advisory Council. I am the current national point of contact for the Netherlands, which means that if you're becoming a member in the Netherlands, I'm the first point of contact you can reach out to, and I can support you in whatever you need and looking for, as well as I organize events in the Netherlands. And that's why I also was talking about the project group, is that I'm also the co-lead for the Space Exploration Project Group, which is a project group of around 900 members. And our project range between mission design, between analog missions, but also sustainability in space exploration. We publish around 8, sometimes 10 papers a year towards conferences and other events where we share our work. So what's SGSC currently doing on sustainability? There's at this moment quite a big recommendation report, which is a combination of all the project groups together. A certain committee has been assembled, and they are now drafting their first report that will be shared with the UN and related activities towards that. That combines all ideas that we have for space sustainability. What means for my project group, we have a couple of pieces in there. One of them is providing a sustainable lunar ecosystem, how we're going to provide this in the future. This is also a bit of policy side related work, and also we're reporting on standardization of space exploration missions. We just actually last week started a new project where we're going to look at how to redesign space missions, quite famous space missions, to make them more sustainable if we should design it at this moment. When you now question, it's already done, these space missions, why are we still doing this? This is really about a source of education, a source of creating awareness in the young generation and let them work on space sustainability related projects to hopefully help them in their future careers in space, but also in sustainability. So that was my really short presentation about Space Generation Advisory Council and the work I do there. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions related to Space Generation Advisory Council, or you're really interested in doing work in this organization, or otherwise if you want to know more about lunar and macro oceans, then you should contact definitely the second one, or follow me on LinkedIn, and I will share a lot of work from what we do in the project group. So thank you for listening, and I think we can go up to the next presentation.
Thank you, Bram. Yeah, we're going to wrap because we really don't have any more time, so we have to. Are you there, Red? Oh. We should go to the. Oh yeah. Red?
Yes,
I'm
here. I'm here.
Yeah, we have like 2-3 minutes for this, so
oh,
we have to
perfect.
go
That's
to
what
the
I need.
discussion, so we can have like if you can do it in 3 minutes or 2 minutes.
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Oh, we can.
So I am writing. I'll be fast. Don't worry.
It's okay,
I am
take your time.
Yeah, okay, it's okay, thank you. I am Wadunga, I'm the CEO of Power.AI. This is a startup I started 12 months ago, so yeah. And our core project is called Space DAO. You may wonder what this is. So I worked all my life in AI applications for satellite imagery until I went to work for the Operations Space Center at ESA as a data scientist, and then I discovered the backstage of how we get images, meaning space operations. So, and we're building a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous orbit, or organization of the orbit. So in this picture, which is on the left, which I'm very grateful that you showed already earlier, which is from the Space Debris Office at ESA, which is very dramatic because you have clouds of objects, and it's kind of scary. But beware of the scale. Each satellite here is the size of Shanghai, so this is the kind of measures. So Space DAO is a project selected by the ESA Cognitive Cloud Innovation Campaign, and we're very grateful about that. We have to provide the prototype by December, and you'll see it's an open source project you can follow. So what's happening in orbit? So we have operations happening. You've seen this picture. You have many satellites from many different companies and many different operators, and they have to interact together to tackle collisions. So there is we've heard about the crazy numbers of satellites that are being filed for requests to be in orbit. It is kind of crazy. But the problem is that the human decision-making scale problem on the ground is a real problem. So SpaceX currently has 3,000 satellites. It's going up and down by 50, minus 50, depending on if they are hit by a geostorm. But the thing is that they're not allowed to go further if they can't prove they can operate those satellites. So this is the situation. You have websites, you have many companies that actually interact in this domain, and since it's becoming private, you have private capabilities to see what's in orbit, to monitor what's in orbit. So in this ecosystem, we have multiplication of claims from different parties. Who do you trust? So here's just a quick example. On the left, you have privateer.com, but they are trying to this is when you go on the website, this is live. This is a picture taken a few hours ago. You see Starlink satellites in a row, 50 of them. You see different satellites in a row down there. We don't know which constellation they are from, but their sign is to be assigned. But you have many satellites, and the collisions are very how do you say? Probably they will happen a lot, and that's what you see actually on the right. You see all the possible collisions, which are less than more than 0.1 probability of happening. So what we're doing with the DAO, the Space DAO, we are trying to build a consensus first on the risk assessment. So anyone could say there is a collision, and they actually do that with what we call AI point solutions, which are focused on one solution. And we're trying to get an ensemble of everyone's solution to input that to an algorithmic consensus, and then the network actually issues the risk. It's shifting the paradigm where you have to contract with one party, you actually participate in the network, and you have information from the network, and you get this, what we call this system AI solutions. So we're building this collaborative data and services platform that will help do that. And then once we assess the risk, we have to assess what action to take. There is a lot of parameters in. You have to maneuver your satellite. When you maneuver a satellite, you have to stop the service of the satellite. Meaning, imagine you've heard like 2 terabytes per something a satellite. When you have to maneuver, it's 0 terabyte. So this is a big deal in terms of service that the satellite promised to give. So taking on a maneuver is a very difficult decision for some of the constellations. So we're trying to issue, to register everyone's default, which is not done today, and constraints. So meaning that if you moved in the past, today it's not considered. So we could consider that you're doing effort on the network for the space safety, and then we can consider that it's not your turn to move, it's the others. And we have like many parameters we can add to this algorithmic consensus. This is only the first step to have this consensus. Then what's coming next? You see here like about 50 Starlink satellites being sent in orbit. This is an old picture from 2019, but it's always the same procedure for operations is still the same. And so what's happening is that at some point those satellites are partly used in orbit. So how can you sustain that? Also, the game right now is a constellation who wants to take all the market. So they are not sharing resources. But at some point, if we could use our platform, which is a decentralized platform that belongs to the stakeholders, not to us, if we could use that as a medium for sharing resources, that would be amazing. So our mission is SpaceDAO. This is our core project, and we're moving things toward decentralization because we think it's very important for this multi-governmental collaboration. We have a website where we share things open source, and we have a lot of things to do, a lot of business developments, partnership, interactions, marketing, and also AI and decentralized systems, distributed systems, and maybe you've got it, blockchain. So we're hiring. So my name is Ryan Bunga. Do not hesitate to connect on LinkedIn. I'll be super happy. I'll send you an email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Any questions from the audience or from you guys to one of the? No? Then we'll continue with a small discussion. I don't know if we have time yet. Yeah? Yes. So you were talking about decentralization. So why is that a must-have in the space sector? So can you elaborate on that for a bit?
So what we see on our project is that if we have like different stakeholders, they have funds from the US. When you have an investor from the US, they're actually constraining you to give the service to US entities or to make money and wealth for the US, which is very incompatible for to serve other countries because space is very multi-governmental. We think that we need a bit more decentralization on this aspect. So decentralization is just a tool for augmenting trust of the different parties. So yeah, I'll keep it short that way, but happy to answer more questions.
Yes, thank you, Rez. And for Chiara, I had a question about space for all. Could you explain the concept and why it's so necessary? Why it's so important to have another SDG when we have the others? Because, yes.
Well, I think there are a few aspects as to why this is so important, and one of them really being the fact that we do have the 17 other SDGs, and they're very Earth-focused. However, they do not take into consideration all the tools and the capabilities that we need to use in order to even try to achieve these. So if we're using space to solve problems on Earth, and we're also going into space, we need to make sure that we do this sustainably. Otherwise we risk the tragedy of the commons, right? If we look at global commons, I mentioned it really briefly, like Antarctica, like the deep seabed, how you manage those. And it is a finite system, you have to be careful, because otherwise you're going to run out. So that is why this is very important. And then there's also just the awareness factor. I keep saying this, I think space has a fundamental marketing problem. We're all happy, we're in our bubble, and we love talking about space, but as soon as you venture out, there is not that much awareness about what space actually means, and that it goes beyond Elon Musk and astronauts. So it is very important to also use these tools to draw the connections of how space interacts with our everyday lives. And that is, why I think it's so important.
Yes, so I have a question for the other panelists. So do you agree with what Chiara just mentioned about also we have all these tools for Earth, for helping Earth, for stability purposes? Do you agree that we also have to look up and see if there's also...
I do think that space infrastructure is vital nowadays. Not only Earth observation that we've discussed a lot, but for sure also navigation and communication satellites. That's very, very valuable. And that we actually, so for example, our PIN transactions, they also depend on these navigation satellites. So if they would break, we have a lot of problems that we can't even imagine right now. So I do think it's very important to protect that and to if you launch new satellites, do that in a sustainable manner. Also think about what happens if they die. What are you going to do with them? You don't want them to stay in the same orbit. You want to make sure they come back to Earth or actually move to another orbit. So I think space is vital for many things, not only the Earth observation satellite, also the other ones. And that and then we need to maintain that and just, do space, launch new satellites in a sustainable way and think about those things. And I think we did not do that enough in the past. So yeah. Yes?
I of course completely agree, and just to mention, a panel like this would not be possible without space technologies to have people come, just to give a brief example as well. But I also think the diversity and the inclusivity that we have in the space sector, and also partially probably because it's a relatively young sector, that we also can see a lot of new changes where we indeed, as somebody mentioned earlier, that we have quite young people here, a lot of women here from all kinds of backgrounds, not just data sciences, but also geology. We also have people from AI. So I think this is also what we need, not just to have successful space exploration and new space technologies, but also for here on Earth. I mean, we're not alone on this Earth. We have almost 8 billion people right now. And to also make sure that those countries that are underrepresented are also included in the space sector, because they are also part of the whole global system. And they can also contribute in ways that we might not even be able to see right now. So I think that's, I actually very agree. Let's make space for all, and SDG as well.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Do we have time for 2 questions?
I don't have time anymore.
No, we don't have time? Sorry. No, unfortunately we don't have any time anymore, but are there other questions or we can answer from the public?
Maybe after the time.
I'm sorry?
After this.
Oh, after this. Okay, then we can discuss. We can speak to the speakers privately then after this session. So,
Yeah, sure.
I guess online, right? Have a good one, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. So thank you to virtual speakers
also, yes.
Yes, and thank you to physical speakers for joining us, bringing awareness to this very important topic, and inspiring words for the public. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.